August 7th, 1944, 3:42 a.m. Imperial Japanese Navy Intelligence Headquarters, Tokyo. Colonel Akira Nakamura pressed the headphones tighter against his ears, listening for the fifth time to the intercepted radio transmission from Guam. The sounds made no sense. Not encrypted gibberish, that he understood. This was something else entirely. Something that shouldn't exist in modern warfare. Mawasi, Dibe, Shush, Ga, Klizi, Tkin. Nakamura had broken Soviet codes. He'd cracked British naval communications. His team had decoded American convoy routes that sent 12 merchant ships to the bottom of the Pacific. But these transmissions from the American Marines defied everything he knew about cryptography. They weren't following any pattern. They weren't mathematical. They were incomprehensible. In the next 18 months, this mystery would haunt Japanese intelligence operations across the Pacific, contributing to catastrophic failures at Iwo Jima and Okinawa. The Americans had deployed a weapon Japan's finest cryptographers couldn't touch: the Navajo language, transformed into an unbreakable code by 400 Native American Marines who became known as code talkers. This is the story of how an ancient indigenous language defeated the intelligence apparatus of an empire, told from the perspective of those who tried and failed to break it. If stories of courage and ingenuity move you, please like and subscribe. Every subscription helps us honor the memories of those who served. Colonel Nakamura came from a family of scholars. His grandfather had studied linguistics at Tokyo Imperial University. His father had served as a diplomat in Washington before the war. Nakamura himself had spent 3 years at Stanford studying mathematics and language before returning to Japan in 1937. He understood codes. He understood patterns. He understood how human minds organize information. That understanding meant nothing against Navajo. The Imperial Japanese Navy's Intelligence Division had achieved remarkable successes in the early war years. Japanese cryptographers broke American diplomatic codes even before Pearl Harbor. They'd intercepted communications about the Doolittle raid. They'd decoded enough fleet movements to ambush American forces at several engagements. Nakamura's unit, specifically tasked with breaking American military communications, had a success rate approaching 60%, until the Navajo transmissions started appearing in intercepted radio traffic in mid-1942. The first Navajo transmission Nakamura's team intercepted came from Guadalcanal in August 1942. Radio operator Hiroshi Tanaka brought the recording to Nakamura's office on a humid morning when the monsoon rains pounded Tokyo. "Sir, we've captured something unusual from the American Marines on Guadalcanal. It doesn't match any known cipher system." Nakamura listened to the recording. The transmission lasted 47 seconds. Every sound was clear, precisely articulated, transmitted with professional discipline. But the words, if they were words, bore no resemblance to English, Spanish, or any European language in his database. "Play it again." They listened 5 more times. Nakamura's trained ear caught recurring sound patterns. Mawasi appeared 3 times. Dibe, twice. These were words, not random phonemes, but words in what language? He gathered his team, 8 cryptographers, 4 linguists, 2 American-educated specialists. They analyzed the recording for 3 days. Every traditional cryptographic approach failed. Frequency analysis revealed nothing. Pattern recognition found no mathematical structure. Letter substitution made no sense because they couldn't identify letters, only sounds that didn't exist in any language they'd studied. Senior linguist Kenji Watanabe offered the first clue. Colonel, these phonemes don't appear in Indo-European languages. The tonal qualities, the glottal stops, the consonant clusters, this might be from a completely different language family. Which family? I don't know, sir. It's unlike anything in our archives. Nakamura felt something he rarely experienced in his work: genuine confusion. Every code system had a foundation. Every cipher had logic. Even one-time pads, theoretically unbreakable, followed patterns in how they were used. But this transmission seemed to exist outside those rules. Over the next 3 weeks, Nakamura's team intercepted 17 more Navajo transmissions from Guadalcanal. Each one added to their frustration. The transmissions were clearly military communications. They occurred during combat operations, contained what seemed to be numerical information, referenced what appeared to be locations, but the underlying language remained impenetrable. Nakamura escalated the problem. In September 1942, he submitted a formal report to Imperial Navy Intelligence Command. Urgent request for linguistic analysis of unidentified American communications system. The report reached Admiral Takeo Kurita, who authorized expanded resources. They brought in Professor Masao Yamada from Tokyo Imperial University, Japan's leading expert on indigenous American languages. Yamada had studied Sioux and Cherokee before the war. He listened to the recordings for 1 hour. This isn't Sioux or Cherokee. The phonological structure is completely different. Based on the consonant patterns and vowel qualities, I believe this might be from the Athabascan language family, possibly Apache or Navajo. Can you translate it? No. I studied those languages at an introductory level 20 years ago. The grammatical structure is extraordinarily complex, one of the most difficult language systems in the world. Without extensive materials and native speakers, translation is impossible. Impossible. Nakamura hated that word. They tried everything. His team compiled every scrap of information about Southwestern American Indian languages from pre-war academic journals. They found grammar notes, vocabulary lists, ethnographic studies. None of it helped. The Navajo language had never been systematically recorded. No comprehensive dictionaries existed. The language lived primarily in oral tradition. December 1943. After 16 months of failure, Nakamura's team achieved what they thought was a breakthrough. They'd compiled enough recordings to identify recurring sound patterns that seemed to correspond with military terminology. Moasi appeared frequently before American artillery strikes. Neos preceded tank movements.
Tsa occurred in transmissions involving aircraft. Cryptographer Lieutenant Koji Sato presented the analysis with pride. "Sir, we believe we've identified approximately 40 vocabulary items. We're building a lexicon." They tested their theory. During the Tarawa fighting, they intercepted a transmission containing Moasi 3 times in quick succession. Nakamura's unit predicted an imminent artillery barrage. They warned the local commander. The artillery barrage came, but 6 hours later than predicted, and in a completely different sector than their analysis suggested. 3 more attempts at prediction failed similarly. Their lexicon was worthless. Senior analyst Yuki Tanaka explained why. "Sir, they're identifying sounds, but we don't understand the grammar. Navajo is an agglutinative language, meaning small changes in a word completely alter its meaning. The same root sound can mean different things depending on tone, duration, and what comes before or after it. Without understanding the grammatical structure, we're just guessing." "Then learn the structure." "From what materials, sir? We have no grammar books, no native speakers willing to help, no systematic documentation. We're trying to reconstruct one of the world's most complex languages from radio intercepts." What Nakamura didn't know, what Japanese intelligence never discovered, was that the Navajo code talkers weren't simply speaking Navajo. They'd created a military code using Navajo as the foundation language. The code worked in layers. First, the Navajo code talkers used Navajo words to represent English military terms. Turtle, chiech meant tank. Ironfish, best klo, meant submarine. Hummingbird, tachik itlitsi, meant fighter plane. These weren't translations, they were code words in Navajo for English concepts. Second, for spelling out English words that had no Navajo equivalent, they used an alphabet code where Navajo words represented letters. Ant, walachi'i, meant A. Bear, shus, meant B. Cat, moasi, meant C. They had multiple words for frequently used letters to prevent pattern recognition. E could be elk, dze, I, anna, or ear, ajad. This rotating vocabulary defeated frequency analysis, the primary tool of cryptography. Fourth, and most importantly, they transmitted everything in combat speed. Navajo is already spoken rapidly. The Navajo code talkers, under fire, transmitted at speeds approaching 1 word per second. No time for careful phonetic analysis, no opportunity to break down grammatical structures, just a torrent of incomprehensible syllables that somehow made perfect sense to other Navajo speakers. Nakamura heard this system in action, but couldn't see the architecture underneath. To Japanese cryptographers, it sounded like a machine gun of alien phonemes. Tcheng, glei, dze, mohasi, lin yeches bella, sana, aja de beshush. They couldn't even identify where words began and ended. February 1945, Iwo Jima. The battle that would claim 7,000 American and 18,000 Japanese lives began with a problem for Nakamura's intelligence unit. They intercepted massive radio traffic in the days before the invasion. 90% of Marine operational communications used the Navajo code. American commanders knew Japanese intelligence was listening. They knew Japan had broken other American codes. They specifically routed critical communications through Navajo code talkers because they knew, with absolute certainty, that Japan couldn't break it. Major Howard Connor, communications officer for the 5th Marine Division on Iwo Jima, later reported, "Were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima." 6 code talkers worked around the clock during the first 2 days, transmitting and receiving over 800 messages without error. Japanese forces couldn't intercept a single usable piece of intelligence. Nakamura listened to the recordings from Iwo Jima in his Tokyo office while American B-29s bombed the city around him. The volume of Navajo transmissions was overwhelming. His team had given up trying to decode them. They simply logged them, time-stamped them, and filed them in cabinets that nobody ever opened. In a report to Naval Intelligence Command dated February 28, 1945, Nakamura wrote something he never thought he'd have to admit. "We have decoded American, British, even Soviet communications. But these Navajo transmissions, we cannot even identify the language family with certainty. We cannot determine where words begin and end. We cannot establish vocabulary patterns that hold true across multiple intercepts. It is as if they speak in sounds from another world. We are blind." The report recommended abandoning efforts to break the Navajo code. Resources should be redirected to other intelligence priorities. The recommendation was approved. What made Navajo unbreakable wasn't just its complexity. Many languages are complex. What made it unbreakable was its isolation. Navajo had never been systematically recorded in written form. No comprehensive dictionaries existed. The language had no significant speakers outside the American Southwest. It belonged to the Athabascan language family, completely unrelated to Indo-European or Asian languages. Its grammar used verb structures that combined subject, object, and action into single words that changed form based on context. A simple example. The Navajo word for I'm hungry is dichen nistachi, but you're hungry is completely different. Dichen nistring. And he's hungry is different again. Dichen yistri.
There's no common root that a cryptographer could identify. Each form seems like a unique word. Multiply this across thousands of vocabulary items. Add the code talker's military code layer. Factor in combat speed transmission, and you have a communication system that defeated the finest cryptographic minds of the Japanese Empire. The code talkers transmitted information about troop movements, artillery coordinates, tactical plans, supply requests, and casualty reports. Every single message was transmitted in the clear. No electronic encryption, no cipher machines, no codebooks. Just Navajo speakers talking in their language. And Japan never broke it. After the war, Colonel Nakamura returned to civilian life. He became a professor of linguistics at Waseda University, specializing in cryptography and language structure. He never publicly discussed his wartime work on the Navajo code. In 1971, a former student asked him about Japanese cryptographic capabilities during the war. Nakamura, by then 73 years old, gave a rare, candid answer. "We broke many codes. We were quite good at it. But the Americans deployed something we had no defense against. A language so isolated, so complex, that our entire apparatus of cryptography was useless. It wasn't that we couldn't break their code, it's that there was no code to break. Just human beings speaking in a tongue their enemies literally could not understand." The Navajo code talkers served with distinction throughout the Pacific Campaign. They fought at Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Peleliu, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. They transmitted tens of thousands of messages. Japan intercepted many of them, recorded them, analyzed them, and failed completely to extract useful intelligence. Not one Navajo code message was ever deciphered by Japanese intelligence. The code's security came from an unexpected source: the very isolation and suppression that Native American languages and cultures had suffered for decades. The U.S. government had tried to erase these languages through boarding schools and assimilation policies. Yet when war came, that same language, preserved by stubborn communities who refused to let it die, became one of America's most powerful weapons. The Japanese Empire had intelligence, technology, and some of the world's finest cryptographers, but they had no defense against warriors speaking in their grandfather's tongue, transmitting in a language that had never been conquered, never been broken, never been anything but free. Colonel Nakamura died in 1982, his professional reputation intact despite the Navajo failure. He left behind thousands of pages of cryptographic analysis, linguistic studies, and intelligence reports. Filed among those papers was a single handwritten note dated September 1945, 1 month after Japan's surrender. In war, we assume victory comes from superior force, better strategy, more advanced technology. But sometimes it comes from something simpler: speaking in a voice your enemy cannot hear, using words that have no translation, deploying a weapon that exists nowhere in their experience. The Americans understood this. We did not. Perhaps that is why we lost. The Navajo code talkers created approximately 600 words in their military code. They used their language to save countless American lives. They transmitted orders that shaped battles across the Pacific. They did all this while Japanese intelligence listened, recorded, analyzed, and ultimately surrendered to the simple fact that some things cannot be broken. Not because they're too complex to understand, but because understanding requires something more than intelligence or technology. It requires sharing a history, a culture, a way of seeing the world that no amount of study can replicate. The Navajo code talkers weren't just radio operators. They were guardians of something older and more powerful than any military technology. A language that had survived centuries of attempted erasure, now deployed in its finest hour to protect those who had once tried to destroy it. Japan never broke the code because there was no code to break, only the living voice of a people who refused to be silenced.